Charles, I think Ukraine might be on the verge of becoming a smoldering wreck. How are you there, Charles?
I'm doing well, far away from Ukraine, but
Okay.
I'm glad in some ways that we made the decision to do this several hours ago, many hours ago. It's obviously not good for the people of Ukraine what's going on, but as we speak, uh, Zelensky and his junta made the very unwise decision to try to use a swarm of drones to take Putin out of the sky in his helicopter. And that was a bad move on their part. Putin survived, and Medvedev has just put out on Twitter, something like if the Banderite regime, if the West continues to send money and military support to the Banderite regime, this is what the buffer zone is going to look like. And it's a map of Ukraine where, the current map of Ukraine is basically all turned into Russia except for a tiny little sliver of red. You see
I
it
see it. Yeah.
there.
Slit. Well, I mean, look, I don't mean to laugh at the death and destruction of anybody, but as you know, I do have some firsthand experience. And I can't say that this is, I mean, look, I don't want to generalize, but there is a kind of a culture in Ukraine. And I think that being stubborn and self-destructive and vindictive are it.
Yeah, and well, the reality is that the Ukrainians, the Zelensky regime, has has become a dictatorship. I mean, they are pulling people off the streets who shouldn't be fighting and dragging them off to war. He suspended elections. He's outlawed his political opponents. He's jailed his political opponents. He's denying them access to legal counsel. The man we had on, his lawyers were sent to the front lines
Crazy.
in retaliation. So this is not. I mean, this is a regime that maybe Biden could be comfortable supporting, and maybe he had to support them because he and Hunter and his whole family had been bribed, and the Ukrainians had the receipts. And they're probably saying either directly to Hunter or indirectly, do you really think we put you on the board of Burisma to pay you whatever they were getting and all that stuff because we wanted nothing back? No, we want the gravy train of military and other aid so we can still get a return on our investment. And, the thing that really is shocking to me is I review my notes and I have boxes and boxes of notes, and some are online, so I can review them remotely. But you review the whole situation from 1988 to the present, and it's a disaster for America and the West, an utter unmitigated disaster. Unregulated globalism got us into all kinds of financial, crimes. Frankly, weakened the dollar. People around the world correctly now have real doubts about whether the dollar can even serve going forward as a reserve currency. The Clintons were in hock to the Chinese, so later the Bushes were also in hock to the Chinese, and Tony Blair, they surrendered Hong Kong to China and let China get into the WTO when it shouldn't have been. They've let China cheat nonstop on their any treaty. They're cheating. They're spying on us in our universities. They're stealing technology right and left. And this from a position in 1988, as the Berlin Wall was coming down, where we really were the number one by far. I mean, in 1988, I've said this before, China, India, they were still eating dirt, vegetarian dirt sandwiches there. It's a
Vegan.
mess. Vegan dirt.
Yeah.
But it was a total mess. And so was China. Europe had not. Europe was still a mess. East Europe, West Europe, still a mess. And we were a large, integrated, growing market with a population that was really interesting. That we had, and it's no thanks to any modern politician, but merely to the accidents of the supposed flu in 1918 that changed the population bubble. Then the Depression, which changed it more, and also the agricultural revolution, which brought down birth rates. Then the long World War II, then the baby boom. And you ended up, by the time Clinton took power in 92, 93 January, you had a population where the most vibrant and growing cohort was people aged 25 to 54, which these are the most productive, and generally speaking, the most productive people, the people who are getting married and forming families and building and expanding houses and saving for retirement. That was a population that was growing. The senior population under Clinton's administration was actually shrinking. So then, by 2002, that started to change as the senior population started growing, and now we're in this place where, because people aren't getting married in the U.S. And having children, we've got old farts like me, or a big percentage of the population, and they're expensive to take care of if they don't have their own savings, and so it's just been a mess. And we hear from, that guy in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. I've only met him once at that dinner I mentioned. Small group of maybe 15 people, and he sat directly across the table from me. He should not be allowed to speak and drink. I mean, the man, he rolled into a session drunk at 6:30 in the afternoon. 6:30 in the afternoon. He was already drunk. What self-respecting public servant, senator, one of 100, rolls into a meeting with, forget me, some very powerful people were in that room, maybe 15 people. And we were talking about the State Department under Biden and what they were doing and this and that. And Graham was a guest. I mean, he just showed up drunk with the speaker, and said he wanted to make some remarks at the end. And so he was asked about what's the foreign policy, and he closed his speech, which was unbelievably hawkish, with the McCain thing. He says, "I just want to end by saying, bomb, 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 bomb Iran." Like, dude, God, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, it's very stupid. Yeah. It's terrible,
so
Charles. Congress is useless.
By design, I think. Yeah. By design. I mean, I'm liking the reaction of the Trump administration to, DOJ gets in there, comes up with all these ideas. They don't go into the bill. This is a false controversy, and I'll tell you why. In reconciliation, which is the process they're going through here, where they only need 51 votes, I think, to get through the Senate, you can only deal with you can't deal with discretionary spending in a reconciliation bill. You have to deal with and DOJ cuts primarily revolve around discretionary spending, although there are some cuts in the program. So there is some false outrage over what's in this bill, this big beautiful bill, and I'm seeing conflicting reports. I like Ron Johnson. I think he's a very smart man and a decent man. He's one of the senators who supposedly is going to vote no. But Barrasso, who is another very sober man from Wyoming, sober, just clear-eyed, as the left likes to say, an experienced guy from Wyoming, he claims, and he's high up, he's I think right below Thune, he claims that they have the votes in the Senate to get it through. And with that, once this bill clears, if it does, and gets signed into law, then we can turn our attention to more of the DOJ cuts. And I think that's basically the way we may get through this. Meanwhile, Trump had given an ultimatum for Europe, as I like to call it, YURP, to get serious about trade talks. And if they didn't, the tariffs were going to go up 50% on June 1, which is, I guess, what is that, next Monday?
Yeah.
Trump had a call with the EU leadership, and they've agreed to suspend that, to give talks a chance until July 9th. So that's good. But back on Ukraine, I mean, Zelensky understands that in any peace deal, he's out of power. And worse, he's out of power. He's screwed either way. He's either going to be replaced by people who are more hawkish than he is against Russia, or he's going to be replaced by people who are going to say, "What the hell were you doing since 2022?" Because remember, when he ran and won in, I think, 19, he ran on a campaign of stopping, of forging a peace with Russia, and he got very high participation and support in that election. Then he became this corrupt war hawk and dictator. So he knows that any cessation of hostilities leading to peace talks and peace, he's out, and he may be out of the he may be on the
Off the planet.
not breathe,
Yeah.
not breathing much anymore plan. So that's one thing. The Democrats at this stage, I think it's really fantastic that Jake the Snake Sullivan he's landed at Harvard. Actually, he's teaching at Harvard or doing something at Harvard. So that's very fitting.
Douchebaggery 101.
That's right.
It's a prerequisite.
How to be, yeah. And the more I think about this, when I remember when I did not get into Yale Law School, I was told that for 165 places in the class of 1981, Yale Law School, there were 500 applications where the applicants had perfect LSATs, the highest possible, and a 4.0 average or higher, right? That was it. I did not have either of those. So, that was then. I have a suspicion that at some point after that, and I don't know when it was, that these admissions people decided, you know what, forget all that, screw the man, screw all this stuff, screw this. Let's just anoint idiots. Let's take this guy from Vermont, Jake Sullivan. Let's give him every prize under the sun, full well knowing that he's a moron. I mean, he truly is. I mean, I've seen him on television. He is an arrogant fool. Remember, one of his great things right before October 7th, with the attack by Hamas.
Yeah. Everything's
he gives
totally
the interviews. Yeah, we're doing a great job in the Middle East. Yeah, you sure are. You really are. And so he's over at Harvard. A lot of blowhards are at Harvard. And we've been on this for a while. And Bessett, Bessett is smart. And he just, I don't know if you played the clip or saw it earlier, but in an interview, I think with Bloomberg, he said Harvard is nothing more than a big hedge fund. It's not educating. It's just, they have $52 billion and they're investing in crazy ideas. And he didn't say this, but 99% of the faculty support Democrats. So basically at Harvard and these other elite universities, what we're doing is we're sending a lot of money, tens of billions, hundreds of billions towards these people. 99% go to the Democratic Party. That is not a public charity. And why do we need to support Harvard's medical school, for example? Why does that make any sense?
Yeah.
When you look at Harvard, the biggest program service revenue is not tuition. It's money that comes in to support the hospital system that Harvard's affiliated with.
Wow. Well, and also that's where you had Hans-Jörg Wyss and Lieber.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, Lieber, I thought I saw, what was his first name? Richard.
Aktu.
Aktua Lieber. She got jammed up with the meme coin, I think. So Richard Lieber, Harvard. Let's just see the news about this guy. Because I seem to recall, he was indicted or something. No, here we go. It says second chance. Yeah, here it is. Let's see. Second chance. Convicted U.S. chemist Charles Lieber moves to Chinese university. Oh, yeah. That's a good way to
That should not have been allowed.
Yeah.
That should not have been allowed. Look, the thing, when I was at Harvard Business School, I actually, the first year, they encouraged you to go into study groups. And I didn't really even want to go to Harvard Business School, but it's the best thing I could do, so I did it. And so I was the latecomer. I literally arrived at 2:00 in the morning before I was supposed to show up at registration at 8:30 in the morning. So I was, sleep deprived, jet lagged, and I didn't know that you were supposed to have gotten there several days before then and pick a study group and all this kind of stuff. So I ended up in a study group with a Lebanese guy, a Taiwanese guy, and an Indian guy. So I was on the couch at Animal House, and there were then, I want to say the foreign student population at the business school was like 12%, 10, 12%, maybe a little higher. But with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the opening up of all this stuff, suddenly Harvard and these other elite places, what they did is they didn't really increase the size of the various classes, but they had an applicant pool that went up by tenfold or more.
Hmm.
And many of these applicants, particularly in the professional schools, in business school, for example, many of these applicants were children of billionaires from around the world, and the parents of those children of billionaires were quite happy to make extra contributions or do whatever, and so Harvard just found itself with a flood. The task of filling classes was never an issue. The task of finding professors to teach there never an issue, because people fall all over themselves even now to teach at Harvard. And what they should have done, in my opinion, is they should have gone to a 2-track program. They should have said, "Listen, we're gonna have on-campus students, and then we're gonna have a very large group of off-campus students, outside the country and away from Cambridge and Boston, and we're gonna let those people take the same tests and have the chance to submit the same papers. Now that they have AI, you can do this, and we'll grade the on-campus people and compare their results to the off-campus people. And in cases where the on-campus people are not doing well, we'll boot them, and we'll have a lottery system where we'll take somebody out of Calcutta who's doing well and bring them on campus." And if you did that, you'd have a tremendous increase in your revenue, and you'd foster real scholarship. You'd have people around the planet checking every paper. Hey, there's plagiarism over there. You wouldn't have a president of Harvard, whose scholarship was based on plagiarism, get promoted to very important positions, get into the chair of being president, and then when she was discovered to be a serial plagiarist, say, "Oh, because of her scholarship, which is all plagiarism, what we have to do is we can't fire her. We'll keep her on. We'll just demote her from president and let her teach again." When I saw that, I mean, don't bring. I'm right now, actually. Last night I got an email. My 45th reunion is happening imminently, and I like members of my class and section. And there's two of them are trying to get me to come back to the reunion, and in next week, which I can't do anyway. And so they asked me, "Would you send a video of what your life is like out there?" I'm not doing that. I'm not, helping Harvard.
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
I
Because they're
like
like, "Oh,
these
look
people
at our
personally.
graduates are making money."
I like the people I was in school with, and I enjoyed the experience on balance, and it was good for a while. But Harvard I'm ashamed to admit that I have a Harvard MBA. It's at
I
this
don't think
point. I
you
mean,
should
that's
be.
just
I know what you mean. I don't think you should be ashamed, but it has become a very pathetic shell of its once great self. Now, Charles, as you were speaking, there is already Harvard Online, so they've done it, I think, and you
not the
can
way
take.
I'm talking about. No, not the way I'm talking about. I'm saying, if you're going to charge, uh, which I think they're charging about 65,000 a year. I don't know. You could check, to go there, 65, 75,000 tuition, room, and board. You could probably lower that cost to say closer to a fraction of. It should be less than what the median income is in the United States. That should be the cost of tuition. It shouldn't
I have a
be.
great way to
Yeah.
measure it. It should be an amount that Fannie Willis can pay for with cash from her house.
Right.
It's not the
It
grant.
just, again, when I was at Yale, we had 12 residential colleges, which are basically dorms, and the administrative staff for, call it, 500 residents of a dorm. There were like 3 people. There was a dean, and there was a secretary, and there was maybe one other person, and that's it. If you had a problem, in my residential college was Timothy Dwight, you saw Dean Davey. He was a nice guy. He was kind of like the gym coach at your high school. And if you were reasonable with him, he would get you out of any problem that you might have. Paper's late, give him a few days. Can't take the
Wow.
exam, you're sick. You get this and that. But that was the extent. You didn't have like the Hispanic American support dean and the African American and the Pacific Islander dean and people who don't know what sex they are dean. You just didn't have any of that. And I know at Harvard, and I think at Yale, the administrative staff at Harvard is bigger than the population of students. That's
That's
just
crazy.
preposterous. Yeah,
Dean
it's ridiculous.
Davey.
It should. Yeah, he was a nice guy.
Reminds me of Davy and Goliath.
Yeah, it was a very different period back when I entered in
Well, that's
September of
just it. You
1970.
didn't have people shooting up the campus and, coming to school dressed as terrorists and everything like that. It's just really,
Well, and the school had deferred maintenance. So the old, you and I were in the old campus on one of those walk arounds, that big uh, place that we walked through. Those buildings were put up in like 1910 or thereabouts. And when I got there in '74, they hadn't been maintained for 64 years, and they were like,
How did
they
they
were
not
not. They didn't have
collapse?
good. I don't know. They didn't have good insulation. The paint was coming off the walls. It was, it was a slum. And fortunately, I was in Timothy Dwight my freshman year, which is not in the old campus, and that had been redone. But it wasn't like palatial. And you go to these elite universities, you go to the boarding schools that my kids went to. I mean, they're like, they have hockey rinks and swimming pools and all kinds of fancy stuff. Why do they need tax exemption?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, even Horace Mann, we walked by, they had some kind
Oh,
of pretty impressive sports facility
yeah.
there. I mean, Charles, you were the first one, as far as I know, to bring this up, but it's good to see that Scott Bessent is paying attention to it. And, you were talking about Elon Musk and the fake moving away from Doge, but it seems like every story is saying that he is moving away from Doge and other people are taking it over. I think he was worried about Tesla stock, which has gone back up a bit.
Well, I actually think that you learned this lesson long ago. I did as well. When we hear the phrase everybody is talking about, everybody in the mainstream press
Yeah.
should just go the fuck home. Because I don't care what they have to say. I really don't at this point. These are proven morons and corrupt morons who
That's just it.
spent
It's not just morons. Morons suggest that there's some degree of honesty and they're just stupid. This is absolute, propaganda, deliberate lies, malicious activity. It's bad.
well, and I think the way it works, and actually, I have to give a shout out to Maria Bartiromo. She's an example of somebody who is, who's prepared to stand up to her bosses. In 2007 and 8 and 9, when the first time I guess was in 8 with her, might have been 8 or 9 with her on CNBC. Um, I was on with her, I don't know, 10 times or so, and CNBC was owned by NBC, which in turn was owned by General Electric. So if you're going to get pressure from somebody to not bring up embarrassing shit, you'd think it would come from GE. And so she would invite me on, and I would be reticent because I'm a polite person. I don't go into somebody's home and say, you know what, your foundation is broken, the wiring's shot, I hate your
Plus, you're
food.
ugly,
This
stupid, you're
this
stealing money.
this wine that you're serving for dinner is pathetic. No, I mean, I'm
Saving the good
respectful.
scotch for company, huh?
Exactly. So, but in this case, she pressured me. She said, "Charles, I know you have some concerns about GE. Please share them with our audience." Like that. It was really very impressive. And was she was concerned about the value of her stock options.
That's pretty
Fairly,
funny.
because but she's an example of a non-shill. Jake Tapper, fake yapper, on the other hand, some of our new viewers may not know that I think it was June 1st or 2nd, 2016, which is pretty hot and heavy in the whole Trump versus bitch presidential contest. What was going on in that moment? The Comey hadn't spoken yet, and I was summoned to CNN to be interviewed by Jake Tapper for a supposed 1 hour special about charity fraud in the Clinton Foundation. And he was extremely unprofessional, not prepared, and he thought. The producer began by saying, Mr. Tapper, we've been in touch with the Clinton Foundation. We sent Charles's concerns to them, and they told us that they talked to Charles, and he's satisfied with all of the answers to his questions. And I looked at before, not on air, before the thing started. I said, "Look, that's a bold-faced lie. I have never spoken directly to the Clinton Foundation about, or indirectly, about these questions. So I don't know where you got that information from, but it's a lie."
You know what, Charles? There's
And
certain people who try to do like a Jedi mind trick on you where they'll say that and they're trying to see. A lot of people will say, well, I don't want to be rude. I better not say anything. And then the interview starts and Jake Tapper can repeat it. And because you haven't refuted it, they sort of think
no,
like that. I'm not saying it's a valid way of thinking, but they're just saying there's stupid people who do it. Now, Charles, we have hit the edge of the universe here. We need to go over to the First Amendment forum, so people are going to be able to join us there on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. People who are already with us on Odyssey can watch it for free there until Odyssey implements some sort of, they're going to bring back their payment thing. I also want to remind people that they can now watch by subscribing to me on X. Now, X won't allow me to do sponsor exclusive live streams, so the show will appear there right after we're done. Thanks to everybody who's been subscribing on X. You know, Charles, there's a big counter-lawfare, counter-insurgency coming, as you know. Not too many people know, but it's coming, and Norm is probably, I don't know, he's going to have a really rough time. He's got a pretty... Anyway, we won't talk about that now, but we've got more to discuss about Catch Me If Ukraine, so stay with us, everybody. We will be back in just under 5 minutes. Thank